Welcome to the Philosophemes channel. This is Season 1, Episode 1, in which we will examine the basic concept of soteriology. Soteriology is an important concept for us to consider, especially as we will see when we get to Seminar 1 and we ask the question, what is philosophy? All right. So the first question we might be wondering is why soteriology, right? Why talk about soteriology if you're going to be talking about philosophy? And soteriology itself seems like a strange word, especially if you Google it. What you'll find is that it may not even be listed as related to philosophy. It tends to be considered a theological term. But it's really important for us, and that's why I decided to dedicate the first episode to soteriology. And I think that once we get to the first seminar, you'll be able to see just how valuable these terms are, if you can't see already. Okay, so quick overview of this episode. If the term architectonic may seem intimidating at first, you can just think of it as the architecture of a building. So the idea here is that if philosophy were a building, we are zooming out to a point of view from which we would be able to see the entirety of that architecture, and then we can locate which portion of that architecture refers to as soteriology. One of the ways in which we're going to be doing that is in terms of the interrogative terms. And I think that that's really sort of helpful, and it kind of humanizes this term. All right. So if we think about philosophy in general, you can cover the activity of philosophy in general with these three basic concepts. And those concepts are soteriology, criteriology, and ontology. Of course, you can see how they all end with the term logos, so that we're going to look at that here in a moment. If those are the three concepts then that exhaust this notion of philosophy in general, then what is it? What is philosophy in particular, right? And of course, philosophy in particular would refer to the history of philosophy, because whatever it is that has taken place in the name of philosophy throughout history would be philosophy in particular. So when we ask the question, what is philosophy in general? What is philosophy in particular? We can see that interrogative words, question words. Of course, philosophy is often thought of as asking questions and solving puzzles and problems. And so what we can do is we can line up question words with these parts of the architectonic. So, for example, then soteriology refers to the question why. What you're going to find is primarily this refers to happiness. Okay, so it seems like the majority of the people who turn to philosophy, they initially turn to philosophy because they are trying to understand what happiness is. They're trying to understand how to be happy or how to become happy. They are also interested in questions of love. And so I feel as though when you are looking at different theories of love, if you're looking at different theories of happiness, it can pretty easily start to appear as though, these different theories, these different ideas disagree with one another. And so we can tend to forget that there is a point of view, a level of zoom from which all of these opposing theories fit into the same category, right? And that is a category, of course, in terms of a kind of activity. And if we were to locate that in regard to an interrogative word, we would say the question why, right? And now when we think about a more zoomed in point of view in regard to philosophy, we start to see what's referred to as branches of philosophy, right? And I think that this is a little bit more intuitive and a little bit more familiar for people. So if we're thinking about the branches of philosophy and how they relate to philosophy in general, or the architectonic of philosophy in general, we would say that ethics and philosophical theology pertain to soteriology. And the idea here is that even if you're a nihilist, right? I mean, if you're a nihilist, even if you say, I mean, let's just think of the most negative, way that you could characterize the why question, right? Maybe you could just say life is absurd. You could say life is meaningless. You could say there's no point to anything, right? You could say that there's no God, whatever, however you want to characterize it. The idea is that even when you take those positions in regard to ethics and philosophical theology, you are still providing a soteriology, right? So therefore, the person who says there is no God and the person who says that there is a God, philosophically speaking, they are both doing philosophy in the category of soteriology, right? So real quick, let me just say that again. So they are both, even though they radically disagree, they are both doing philosophy within the same category, and that category of philosophy is soteriology. So again, if we can come to understand these basic concepts, then there's some sense in which we can organize our thinking and organize philosophical activity whenever we witness it. To my mind, this is wildly powerful. The ability to be able to see thought in this way, and so therefore I had to start this way. I had to dedicate the first 3 episodes to soteriology, criteriology, and ontology. Okay, so again, we'll talk about them in the next episodes, but just quickly here, nosology, epistemology, and methodology go along with criteriology. Philosophical theology, philosophical cosmology, and philosophical psychology go along with ontology. And then we'll look at the history of philosophy and the many different ways that we can divide up the history of philosophy. All right, so now on to the etymological definition of soteriology. So etymology is the study of word origins. There's no N in the word. If there's an N in the word, then we would be studying insects and bugs, but we're looking for word origins. Okay, so when you are looking at Greek word origins, I use what's referred to, I don't actually have it beside me anymore. I use what's referred to as the middle little, although nowadays I think that the Liddell and Scott lexicons are all over the internet. So that's a really wonderful benefit. So when we look up these Greek terms, what we see is that soteriology is composed of soterios and logos. And logos, of course, we'll see repeatedly. So I'll be somewhat brief with logos. But with soterios, it refers to a saving or a delivering. There is a wonderful passage in Aristotle's De Anima in which he talks about how we are saving ourselves from moment to moment, right? And the word that he is using there is soterios. So the idea is that when you save yourself, you could be saving yourself in multiple different ways. And so that's where logos comes in. Here we have this idea of the word or that by which inward thought is expressed. In Latin, we get the oratio, and I think that that's important because then we get this idea that inward thought could be referred to as the ratio. So if the word is oratio, the inward logos is the ratio. But I also really like to translate logos as to give an account of. The idea then is that soteriology is to give an account of saving, right? So if you're going to save yourself from moment to moment, or if we are going to have some kind of salvation, if we find ourselves in a condition and we want to improve that condition, right? Notice how general we're being right now, right? If we find ourselves in a condition and we want to improve that condition, we could characterize that in terms of becoming happy or being happy. And that is a saving yourself from the lower condition, right? Is a form of salvation from the lower condition. It may or may not involve anything theological. That's not the question that we're looking at presently. Rather, we're just trying to characterize the idea of, do we think it is possible to move from one state to a better state of being, for example? And if we think that it is possible to move from one state of being to to a better state of being. For example, that we give an account of that it is, but also how it is, then we are doing soteriology. Okay, so soteriology on the internet, it seems to me that you can just Google it yourself, and what you're going to find is that it's primarily a theological term. I believe that almost all of the YouTube videos on soteriology are theological in nature. However, soteriology, to my mind, is first and foremost a philosophical term. So anytime you encounter an ethical theory, for example, or a philosophy of life, you could ask then, what is this theory's soteriology? And by asking that question, you are immediately able to categorize this new theory that you're encountering in relation to all other theories that have ever been articulated in regard to ethics or happiness or life. We're then able to compare them more easily, especially despite the fact that on the surface of it, they may radically disagree with each other. So I really think that this is a very important term for us to understand. Also then, this is Philosopheme number 20. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. So I feel as though not only is it just simply the case that soteriology is the name for a category, and we're memorizing the name of a category, but I think that you'll find that once you're able to start thinking in terms of these higher categories, that you're able to start organizing your own thought in terms of these higher categories. And then you're also able to organize other people's thinking. Like when you're listening to someone talk to you or listening to someone philosophize in front of you, you'll be able to organize their thinking in your mind more easily as well. It's much less information to keep track of whenever you can organize these ideas. I think that soteriology is an extremely important term. That's why we dedicated episode 1 to it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.